Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for sending that, Zach.
You bet. Curtis, good morning, Gary.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here today and for your continued commitment. We appreciate each and every one of you.
Good morning, Curtis, Gary, Emily. It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Hey, McCall. So give folks just a few more minutes here and then we'll go ahead and get started at least with the conversation, and hopefully we'll get some more folks coming on. We've got Mary and Gail. Welcome. Good morning, Eric. Welcome.
Good morning, Zach, and hi, everyone. I'm sitting in for Jacqueline today, who's visiting with family.
Yeah, I wish I was in Florida right now. So I believe the folks that I know had said they were going to be here. We are missing Susan and Stevie. Allison did email me yesterday afternoon and let me know that she was going to be arriving a little late. But we do need at least 9 folks to have a quorum. And it looks to me right now like we have, let's see, 6 folks. Let me see, hold on. Let me just double check my numbers here. Yeah, so we would need 9 folks, but I believe Stevie and Susan should be hopefully joining us shortly. But I think in respect for everybody's time, We have a lot to discuss and get through today, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll just do a quick roll call here, and I'll just go across my screen. And if you just please say your name and where you're from, that would be great. And I'm Zach Hawkins, Director of Indian Ed for All here at the OPI, and I've been asked to facilitate this work. So we'll start with Curtis.
Curtis Smeby, MSU Northern.
Thank you. Gary.
Gary Lucene, Bozeman.
McCall.
Morning, everyone. McCall Flynn, Board of Public Ed.
Thank you, McCall. Gail.
Gail Stephenson, Richland County Superintendent.
Good morning, Gail. Mary.
Mary Ducharme, occupational therapist and assistive technology professional, Kalispell.
Good morning, Mary. Eric.
Yes, Eric Steveotter with the Region 17 Comprehensive Center at Education Northwest.
Morning, Eric. Stevie.
Stevie Schmitz, Rocky Mountain College.
Cheryl.
Good morning, everyone. Good to be here.
Tristan.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of your lovely faces again. And I'm working on getting Susan promoted over to a panelist, so she's here.
Okay, wonderful. Emily. Emily, are you there? Okay, I show her being here. Maybe she stepped away for a second. Susan. All right, maybe we'll check back in with those two in a minute here. Julie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. It's good to see you all.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Emily or Susan, if you can hear me, can you let us know if you can hear me and if you're present? All right, well, hopefully those folks will come back on. They must have stepped away or something. Oh, there's Susan.
Susan, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you because my audio wasn't working, so I wasn't ignoring you. I apologize.
All right, good morning, thank you. And Emily, are you there? Okay. Well, I believe she's there. She's just evidently stepped away, or maybe she's having some technical issues. But that gives us, I believe, 8. As I said, we need 9 for a quorum, but I do believe Allison will be joining us. So I think what I will do is go ahead and just kind of start through the agenda. And then we can go through the endorsement area track change document. We can discuss where we're at with those. Folks can ask questions, make comments. And if Allison is able to make it on here, we will vote on some change recommendations. First of all, just a quick recap. Obviously, from June through the, excuse me here. Okay. So Emily's just letting us know she has another, she's managing another meeting. She'll be joining us shortly. So from June through end of September, we met weekly and made track changes, recommendations to subchapters 3, section 501, and also subchapters 6 and 7. Those were sent forward to the superintendent. And then because we didn't make the original timeline, we sort of took a break and have been tackling the endorsement areas here in the last month or month and a half or so. And I have, a document that I shared, I believe, last Thursday evening. Some of those were still coming in, but it gave you kind of a flavor for what recommendations were being made and who was making those. And so hopefully you've all had a chance to kind of review that, but we will go through it today a little more specifically. I will just make a quick note that I have some areas here where we did not have any change recommendations. Those are art, theater, English language arts, health, PE, industrial arts, music, and also there were some changes to principals and superintendents, but I did also have Tina Versland at MSU also looked at those and didn't make any further recommendations. So I need to clarify that. But I will go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and share this document. Then we can kind of start. I think what I will do is we'll just kind of go through it endorsement area by endorsement area. And folks can just take a few minutes to review. Then they can ask questions, make comments, that sort of thing. Does that sound good to everybody? I'm seeing some nodding, so I'll take that as a yes. That's the word one. Sorry, it's taking me just a minute here. For some reason. Hold on one sec. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Zach, any chance you can make it a little bigger?
Sure.
Thanks. My screen's not very big.
Okay, you bet.
Thank you.
Is that better?
It is. Thank you.
All right. So the first one is agriculture education. This was reviewed by Eric Tileman, who is our ag ed specialist here at the OPI. He didn't make a lot of changes. He recommended that to be more consistent across CTE programs, we remove or reduce the 2,000 hour practical farm or agriculture related experience within 5 years of completion. And evidently that, like I said, that the rationale was just that that's not consistently being applied across CTE programs. And then you can see on item D, I'll just let everybody read that for a second. I'll go ahead and scroll down if everybody's okay with that. You had a recommendation to item F.
Zach, this is Gary. I have one question over in the far right column. It says including a culture of safety wording. Is wording the correct word?
This here you're referring to, Gary,
Yeah,
the Montana Safety Culture Act of 1993.
yeah, it's the top line, including the culture of safety wording. Should that be working or what is safety wording?
I'm assuming that is referencing the wording in the Montana Safety Culture Act.
Gary, this
Okay,
is
all right, good.
Gary, this is Julie. It looks like to me, if we look in the far left column with the current rule and then what the suggested changes are, it stays the same until you get to where it says maintain a safe environment. It says and create a culture of safety. So it looks like to me saying add those words of culture of safety.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
How I interpret it.
Anything else on that one? And then he does recommend a new standard item at the end. It would be item I, and I'll just let you read that language. Any questions, comments on that one? Okay, so now we'll go down. Like I said, there was no changes in art. Oh, okay, I take that back. Mary, do you want to speak to this one since you're here?
Yeah, I just want to mention when you do the career options, there is a well-known artist in Kalispell that went to college in art, and he found that he had to look at all the different, learn all the different modes of art, and when he really wanted to do was color and painting, and he ended up doing an apprenticeship. So just increase the options. I think there's one that says options at the end, and it could be apprenticeships.
Well, would apprenticeships
Yeah.
fall as a career opportunity?
Yeah, career opportunity.
Okay. So I think that would probably be covered then.
Okay, it was just a comment.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So we did have, so Eric Swenson, who again is our business education specialist at OPI, as well as Denise Holland at Western, did review business education. And it looks like Tristan helped kind of show the track changes on this one, but I'll let folks look at items A and B and provide any questions, comments that they would like to. All right, anything on those two before I move on? Okay. So I'll give everybody a minute to look at C, D, and E. Anything on those? I guess there's a little bit on the next page for E.
Zach, this is Cheryl. I would offer a comment as we're looking, especially when we look at adding elements like LMS systems. It begs the question as we look to the future, should we also be looking at augmented reality, artificial intelligence components, because that's on the cusp of what will be going on in our schools.
Okay, thank you for that, Cheryl. So I'll scroll down to F, G, and H, and it does look like Mary has offered that comment as well. Any comments on beyond what was already offered on F, G, or H? Okay,
So, wait a minute.
go ahead, Mary.
So are you gonna put in the LMS systems or no?
So what I thought we would do is we would kind of review these and then kind of vote on them individually. The ones where there's change recommendations offered. And so at that time, I think we could discuss whether we want to include that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, I just want to kind of let everybody review them. Okay, so we'll just look at I, J, and K. And I guess I should clarify, those would be relettered H, I, and J. But Any comments on those? So I'll scroll down and you can look at LMN. And let me see, yeah, I think O, yeah, is all on that page, so. Any questions, comments on those? So P, Q, and R. All right. Any questions, comments on those? Okay. S and T. Questions, comments on those? Okay. I believe, let's see. U, V, and W. McCall, can you see those okay? Do you want me to make them bigger? You're good? Okay. Any comments on those? So item W. And then we have X and Y, and I believe, no, we do have a Z, but can look at X and Y for a moment. Any comments on those two? Okay, and lastly, for Business education, item Z. Any comments? Questions? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and move down. We do not have any recommendations in theater or ELA. Susan, you did send me some stuff that you had worked on, and Jesse Counts, who is our Student Support Services Department Director here at the OPI, kind of took what you had sent and made some changes, but I need to give me just a minute and I'll pull that up.
Well, while you're doing that, I'd just like to say that the faculty in the special education program here felt that we weren't given enough timeline. We were only given like 2 weeks for this work, which we felt it was more important to spend more time on, and also to have an opportunity to include other programs across the state. For example, the University of Montana Western, Carroll College, programs that are also have special education programs. And so we didn't make any recommendations. We simply looked at aligning the Montana PEP standards for this content area with the new CEC standards. And we felt that if this was an important task, that we should have been given more time to do this, particularly as the Chapter 58 committee has been meeting since the summer to be asked to do this like at the last minute was just not reasonable.
Thank you for sharing your concerns. Susan, I agree that it was a tight timeline. So do you have an overall recommendation one way or another on this as far as moving forward?
So no, I'm not going to make any recommendations because I'm not going to speak for all of the programs. And I think a fair way would have been to, we have a higher education consortium that meets twice a year with faculty from all the universities. And this would have been an ideal venue to have brought these content standards forward for faculty from different universities to discuss.
Okay.
So I am not the sole person that is going to speak for special education across the state of Montana.
So I see that it looks like there's I'm not sure. I saw it said that there was a Rachel that raised their hand.
That's probably Rachel Waller from Montana State University Billings. She's not a panelist, obviously.
Right. But I don't see her.
Zach, and this is Julie. I know that we talked with the the feedback group on Monday, I think, or Tuesday. I think it was Monday, right? And one of the pieces that was discussed right out of the gate was the title of this endorsement as students with disabilities. And the feedback group had indicated that the language of this endorsement should be aligned with the language that's used for endorsements across to be special education, if you notice there, P12 rather than students with disabilities. So I just wanted to share that about the title of this endorsement as well from the feedback group and share that information here with the task force.
Yeah, so I have that up now and I can make it a little bigger.
Also, what's the difference between early education and special education? Because you have early education later on. And I thought all Montana students who had early education in the public schools had disabilities or were in special education.
So
I'm
Zach,
not aware of that, but perhaps someone else has a little more expertise in that area.
Zach, this is Julie. No, early childhood education is an endorsement for children who are in ages, if you will, generally speaking, anywhere from PK up through third grade. And so that's aligned with the age group, if you will. There are students who are both identified, if you will, or are children who are early childhood and do have an IEP. So we do service students in early childhood with special education needs through programming for Part B and C. But there are also places where there are pre-K, if you will, early childhood students in schools that
Such as
special ed.
Such as Head Start.
Yeah.
And then.
So they're not the same. No.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Mary.
And it may change as time goes on. I mean, if on the buyback better, everybody was supposed to have, early education if that got passed. So.
So I have here the changes that Jesse made, and again, you see the proposed change to change 1058-510 to special education P12 versus students with disabilities, and again, that's just for consistency. No change to item A. You can see, I'll let folks look at items B and C for a moment.
Well, I will mention that in the P through 3 area, they mentioned something at the top with I would just include environment and proper indoor outdoor play type stuff. You might want to just mention environment and proper environment. I don't know. If you compare way down there with what is up here, then you might want to put something in like that at the top.
When you say way down there, Mary?
Yeah, like P through 3. Down early education, P through 3.
Oh, just okay.
Exactly. So let's note that. Tristan, just remind us when we get down to that part, Mary, to tune in on that. Okay.
Okay.
So let's note that.
Okay, and you can see actually item C has a bunch of the little Roman numerals. I'll let folks look at those for a moment.
Also, I had to plug in there about assistive technology and let's just change it to assistive technology is assistive technology, which means that it's a device or a service for an individual, but it has to be part of the inclusive education, because otherwise teachers think it's not their bailiwick and they don't own it, and then it doesn't get properly used, it gets abandoned. It has to be incorporated into the curriculum.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
And I don't know where you're gonna put that, but
Zach, it's in E.
Oh, right here.
oh yeah, okay, there's assistive technology, okay. Instructional strategies and assistive technology. Someplace put inclusive education. Right? That's what they're doing now is all of the assistive technologies for schools is going into inclusive education.
So Mary, are you recommending when you look at E, where it says select and adapt and use a repertoire of evidence-based instructional strategies, including assistive technology to advance learning of individuals with exceptionalities, including but not limited to. It says whole group instruction, small group, individualized. You are kind of indicating it's not used solely in a, if you will, a pull-out setting, but rather it's used throughout the instruction for a student, regardless.
Yes, it's part of the curriculum.
Do you feel like the words whole group instruction, small group instruction, individualized instruction, it's not specifying, if you will, the setting?
Inclusive, yeah.
So you're saying, but not limited to inclusive whole group instruction?
Not limited to inclusive. Yeah. But not limited to. Yeah, if you can put it in front of all that entire thing right there, and between two and whole, put inclusive.
But Julie, should I just do that now? Or what do
Well,
you
I
think?
think, yeah, that's what, if that's what Mary's recommending,
Okay,
then the group will have to make an ultimate decision on their recommendation overall.
Right.
okay, thank you, Mary. Thank you, Julie. Item F. No change recommendation to item G. You can see the changes there recommended for item H.
I would just say on G, someplace in there, I think we need to include androgyny and androgogy, ANDROGOGY. Because with some well, parents need to be involved. Period. Parents need to be much more involved than they are today. And I think COVID helped that, because parents had to be involved. And like assistive technology, AAC, if you don't have parents involved in it and then they're not using it at home, it's more than likely going to be abandoned. So parent input is tantamount for special education.
So are you recommending a change from the wording families in G, Mary, or what are you recommending?
Yeah, and their families, education process. And education process to improve programs. including families. Or to improve,
Because I mean, families are.
or you
referenced
can
there.
put androgyny, because that's a term to teach the people that are the guardians of the students.
So maybe Zach, in the examples,
It could be in the examples, yes.
So would I put it after?
Yeah, androgyny, ANDROGOGY. I think I have it in GY.
Like
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything with your,
so we need to add that in the second column, because the first column is the
Yeah.
gotcha.
Current rule, and that's not in current.
And Zach, this is McCall. I just did a quick Google and it looks like it's more related to like adult education, not necessarily like parents and families. So I'd like to maybe like get a little more information on this before we just include it in a rule, and see if it is like, this is actually the appropriate place to put it. I don't know. This just feels really like quick to just add something like this without having any other background information.
Well, I mean, especially when the special education people haven't addressed this. It's, and I don't even know if we should be doing this, because maybe we need to give the special education people to address it more. But I mean, I'm just making my comments now, but.
All right, well, I will take it out for now then.
I'm not sure what Roman numeral 3 and 4 mean. What does it mean, understanding of legal resources? And what does it mean? What are we expecting our teachers to do if we navigate federal and Montana law? What does that mean?
Well, my assumption would be, Susan, that it's just a proficiency in understanding it says legal resources. So different legal things that would come into, a particular case with a particular student and how that would impact decision-making is, I guess, how I would interpret that.
It just seems to be that we're putting more of an emphasis on the teacher understanding and having more detailed knowledge of like legal repercussions. And I don't know why we don't just have something that refers to special ed teachers need to have an understanding of special education law.
I think that's and you can see that it's more general in the current version. So I think there was just again, trying to be more explicit.
Zach, one thing that has me thinking, just because we're talking a lot about Chapter 57 right now as well, which is educator licensure. I wonder if this contradicts, I guess, some of the language that's in educator licensure, because as far as I know, and Dr. Mergel, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that having any kind of understanding or formal education regarding or related to any kind of, programs in Montana law or classes in Montana law are required. So just I mean, I think that's more general.
So McCall, this is Julie. I don't really see any contradiction, if you will, with chapter 57. So when we think about where law appears in chapter 57, it's in relation to administrative licenses, because part of the requirements for administrative licenses are both for principal, superintendent, is both around basic understanding of educational law in Montana and federal law for education, and in particular special education law, because many administrators are expected to have that background to be part of IEP teams, if you will. So that's like a requirement that they have to have that as part of their coursework in order to get an endorsement in administration. So this is not in contradiction to that. This is speaking about, for the endorsements for teachers that would earn special education endorsement to be certified to provide those services. It's saying what would be the content or skills or coursework that they would be expected to learn and demonstrate competency, if you will. And so what I think these little Roman numerals are saying is, okay, so we want them to understand the historical legal foundations of special education, be able to really understand the movements in educational, special educational law that really, it's ever evolving in special ed. There's always court cases that are coming up. And so they have to understand that special education isn't static, if you will. There's a lot happening in law. And so I think this is saying, what would we want our pre-service candidates to know about when it comes to special ed law that's kind of guiding their work, if you will. So this sounds like it's saying, okay, do you even know where to get the resources? Do you know how to navigate where to find this information if you're in a situation where maybe a legal question is coming up? Because we wouldn't want them to make those decisions. What we'd want them to know is, how do you seek that? Where do you find that information? How do you get help? That's my thinking on it. But I don't know if the overall H kind of gathers that in and of itself as more broad, and these pieces are all part of it, or if it's necessary to kind of expand it. I think that would be what I would want the group to probably think about. But those are just my thoughts. Hope that helped a little bit.
It did. Thank you.
So can we say, and just not do the middle part, but the original, and then just say with knowledge how to resource legal matters,
To me, it's just veering into, are we asking teachers to go and find an attorney to help them make decisions in the classroom? That's how I'm reading it. I mean, surely they'll go to their principal or they'll call OPI. I'm just concerned about this whole legal resources.
Yeah.
And that they're going to have to navigate laws and
consult with administrators about resources,
Well, to me, it speaks, I mean, the language looks more like knowledge than actual action, I guess.
So Zach, what I hear the group kind of mulling over is maybe they would say, don't recommend any changes on this one. Rather saying, if we want our pre-service folks to just have an understanding, if you will, and that's pretty broad. And then those pieces kind of come under, if you will, instructionally, kind of the coursework design, if you will, of how they go about helping them demonstrate an understanding. These would be the ways in which you do it. So I don't know. That's kind of what I hear the group saying.
And when you say navigate federal and Montana law, I guess that would be the equivalent of, using your resources, but, being resourceful, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, it is, I think, covered more broadly in the existing language. And if
So we're saying they would need to demonstrate this understanding. These seem to be the how you would demonstrate the understanding.
Right.
So the question becomes, would the task force recommend that level of specificity, or does H just kind of cover overall the intention of what we need the candidate to be able to demonstrate?
Curtis raised his hand.
Appropriate protocol. I would agree with Julie. And I think my experience on boards, et cetera, we would go to administrators, superintendent, special ed directors, and then OPI or MTSBA for legal opinions, et cetera, and follow protocols. So I do think this is sort of the how. So I would agree with Julie that we could sort of delete that and feel good about existing language.
Okay. If I hear no other objection, I'll just put no change. No chance. There we go. So I'll let you review items J and K.
Item J is covering an awful lot. I mean, demonstrating the knowledge and understanding of special education laws and regulations. Didn't we just cover that in the previous item?
I can't see that we should expect the teacher preparation programs to focus on preparing candidates for knowledge of the state data collection system. To me, that's something that is the responsibility of the districts.
So you're referencing item K, Susan?
Yes.
Could you use instead of knowledge awareness?
I mean, I'm not sure if this is rewritten to include, if it's a reference to AIM, and yet we've had districts tell us that they'd rather prepare the new teachers themselves in AIM because the system that we have at the moment for preparing educators on AIM doesn't really, it's not a good fit with what we're trying to do in the preparation programs.
So Susan, this is Julie. I'm honing in on what you're talking about too. So knowledge of AIM system, right? I'm not sure that it's knowledge of AIM as much as it is that you're preparing them to understand the IEP documents, right? Like what it, regardless of where they land, right? Because they may be writing IEPs in a total different system than AIM, if you will. So I'm wondering if it's about. So I'm reading this like, okay, so I got to understand the 13 different disability categories. I think it's not knowledge of AIM as much as it is knowledge of the kind of the statewide system and forms for IEPs. Well, because that's where everything lives, right? Like even their evaluations and stuff, where they would document some of that, even their notices to families. So I think if it's specific to this is overall for procedures in Montana, I think you could take the word AIM out and it's just knowledge of
Well,
forms.
Well, I would say take that phrase out. If nobody knows, if we're disagreeing on what it means, then we should take it out.
Mhm.
And surely knowledge of state, federal processes is sufficient.
Mhm. I think so too.
So just take this.
Well, I think that should come out, yes. So let's see here. Demonstrate proficiency in Montana special education procedural competencies. So they took out Montana. So it's just basically saying that any candidate needs to understand special education procedures. It's like the procedures and the forms, right? That are used for this stuff.
Regulations and rules is repetition, in my opinion.
And then if you notice here, Susan, like I'm just looking, you see what that at the bottom here, that's where they got those Roman numerals that were up above. So if you look in the far left-hand column, in the current law, it says identification of social and cultural movements in special education law. I think that was little Roman numeral one above. And then court cases which shaped special education law, which was number 2. Understand legal resources to assist decision-making and the ability to navigate federal and Montana law. It looks like to me what they're recommending is that they took those things right there. And rather than it being under proficiency in procedures here, they moved those things up to, Zach, can you scroll up, please?
Well, yeah, but it's not going to be there now.
Okay, they moved those up to,
Right.
can you just put undo for a second, Zach?
Yeah, hold on. It's going to take a minute.
They literally took the exact language that was down there under procedures and Roman numeraled up them up here in H. That's where that came from. And it looks like they were trying to combine those under law. So when you go back down to K for a second, Zach. So what you see there is they took that whole, those pieces, moved them up, and then they're also recommending not having the word AIM in there. So the question is, I think that K really, for a pre-service teacher that's being prepared, are you asking them to be able to demonstrate proficiency in Montana special educational procedural competencies? Because that's the essence of this.
We shouldn't, because they don't all stay in Montana.
So they took out Montana, right? Demonstrate proficiency in special education procedural competencies, including knowledge of state and federal regulations, knowledge of data collection systems and state forms, knowledge of state and federal special education processes. So they kind of took those legal pieces, moved it above, and then kind of generalized this a little bit more broad by what they meant, not so specific around aim, if you will.
And real quick, I just want to acknowledge that Allison has joined us from MSU. Good morning, Allison. Glad you're here. Thanks for making the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we're just scrolling through these endorsement area changes and discussing them.
Okay.
So then it looks like, Zach, to continue the conversation, you'll notice they took parts of K about the 13 disability categories and added them down, if you will, into a new standard. Mm-hmm. Well, that is important for Susan. This is Julie again, about demonstrating the understanding of the different disability categories, and then really thinking about their ability to then, you know, help make informed decisions about the learner regarding FAPE and least restrictive environment, which is not included up above in K. Okay, Zach, you want to keep moving maybe?
Sure. So do you want me just to leave these as is then for now?
I don't know what the task force is recommending on those.
So did you put in the legal stuff again on I or whatever?
So I just, yeah, so we just basically
Okay. Okay.
untracked, went back until it kind of restored this.
Okay.
And then this K, it was here. So they made this change here to take those things out and move them up above.
Can we get rid of the and rules? At least that part? Just say regulations. Do we need and rules?
So remove,
And rules.
Well, when we talk about state, we don't talk about regulations, we talk about rules. So like ARM.
Oh, okay.
Gary has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. To me, regulations and rules are two different things, and you need to understand both. So
Okay.
it could be regulation or statute, and then OPI might develop rules or something. So it's two different elements, at least by my knowledge.
Okay. So I'm gonna minimize this and then go back to the main document. So world languages, we did have some recommendations.
Could I just interject a minute? But I'm not sure if you noticed that Rachel Waller, who's on the faculty here, had put in the chat that her comment about how the English language arts specialists also felt that they weren't included in the process. And you had noted that there were no changes in that area. So I just wanted to make sure that that didn't get lost
Okay,
in the meeting today, that there was another area where faculty with that specialty felt that they didn't have an opportunity to have any input. And apparently those standards have changed since the last time that the national standards have changed since the last time these PEP standards were reviewed. So essentially, we're not updating them.
so I
because
did,
nobody's had input.
okay, and thank you for bringing that to my attention, Susan. So I did, Dr. Bev Chin at the U of M did review these and against the new standards, and essentially said that she felt that the spirit of the new standards was basically incorporated in existing chapter 58 ARM. And that is why she didn't make any changes, but we did have a conversation about it.
But that's my point. I don't think that one person should really be speaking for the whole of this, all of the programs in the state. Because I think it's more beneficial to have multiple perspectives from faculty in that content area. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. So I'll go, here's the first few items in world languages. I'll give everybody a moment to review these. Allison, you look like you're squinting. Do you want me to make this bigger?
I probably always squint, Zach. It's plenty big. Thank you. I'm thinking.
Okay.
I did notice, I think it was in this section that there was something about English as a ESL. Is that in this section or no?
I believe it is at the very end, Mary.
Okay. And then there was something about people were talking about ASL.
Well, we had a broad recommendation to consider an ASL endorsement.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is that in this part or no?
no.
Okay.
Any questions, comments on item C or D? And obviously there's a recommendation to delete item F and the rationale. Any thoughts, comments on G or H? And again, these ones would just be, it wouldn't change the content, it would just change the lettering due to the deletion above. See a minor change to item M. Any comments on N, O, or P? Any comments on Q, R, or S? You can see item T. Trying to just clarify language, make it less redundant. The recommendation to delete item W. Any comments, questions on those two? No change to number 2, but a recommendation to delete item A. And a rationale. And I will just say, so I did have a conversation with these folks. And ultimately, see if I can sum this up. So basically, for sort of Western languages, the proficiency level is intermediate high. That is required, but for other languages that probably generally wouldn't be offered in Montana, such as Japanese or Arabic or something like that, the proficiency required would be advanced low. However, Dr. Brokaw said really in reality there's not in his mind a huge difference there. I would note, we had Dr. Marco and Dr. Lacasse at U of M also in this conversation. And ultimately they settled on just sticking with the intermediate high. So I don't know if that helps with that rationale, but that's kind of where that landed. So you have a long explanation there. So with that deletion, these would be A and B. So Mary, do you want to talk about your comment here on item B?
Yeah, when you're dealing with ESL students, I got tutored through Washtenaw Literacy, which is a free virtual program. And they do ESL, and this is some of the instruction that they gave: self-regulated learning, strategy development, student-centered learning, universal design for learning, and use of questioning for deeper learning. So for the ESL, and they also mentioned that they haven't commented on the ESL, or somebody mentioned that.
Mhm.
We include comments below, but it would be a good idea to get ESL folks to comment.
Yep,
So that's my comment.
okay. Any other comments on this?
Zach, this is Julie. There, I did, from the feedback group on Monday, the conversation around that there is an endorsement that's offered for ELL, English language learners, which is different from English as a second language. Because we do have students whose first language is English, but they're still considered English language learners, given their limited English skills. And that does exist in Montana, where we have students who qualify as an English language learner and meet that definition, who receive services, but it's not as English as a second language. So there is a difference between ESL and ELL. And so part of the conversation was that should there be consideration that there be a separate endorsement for ELL?
Yeah, but ELL would be more like a basic learner, I would think. And then ESL might be just somebody from a foreign country. I
Correct.
think, yeah.
Correct. So it's not necessarily that it's a second language for an ELL person. It's that they have limited proficiency.
But, Washtenaw Literacy does both they do adult literacy, basic learner, and people from different countries. So in those classes were for both groups of people. So I think you can lump them together, but.
Okay. Any other comments?
But you could say ESL and ELL.
But again, I think if we're saying that it's for ELL, it's not, English is not a foreign language, it's just a limited proficiency language. And since
Okay.
we're talking about world languages, I don't know if that would be appropriate there.
Where would it be appropriate then? In the language arts, LEA? Or in special education?
I would say probably special education. But again, there may be other folks on here that would want to comment on that.
So Zach, I would like, if you look at C, right, this is the critical piece that I think, just to potentially hear from the task force or what they're thinking is ESL. So it's saying ESL in the context of other disciplines. It's not ESL, it's ELL. English language learning. Many times you are addressing students' language skills in English as almost like a language objective in addition to a content objective. So sometimes you're having to teach both of those simultaneously because you have English language learners. So you have almost a content standard that you're teaching, but you're also supporting them with almost a language objective in a class as well. And so this really is an ESL, what the note is referencing. So I guess part of this conversation needs to be, is there any thoughts from the group around should there be recommendations around an ELL endorsement separate from this? Is it something we that lives in world languages?
Mhm. Yeah,
Thoughts?
I agree that you do have to do, it's kind of a language arts thing in addition, but I mean, so is the world language if you think about it. I mean, you do have to do some language arts
Right.
too, so I don't know.
Well, I think there was a broad, if I'm not mistaken, there was a broad recommendation to include an ESL endorsement. You know, and so perhaps the question is, should that endorsement be ESL or ELL?
I mean, this is Allison. It's definitely not my area of expertise, so I feel like I'm on a limb a little bit, but I hear what Julie is saying, and I agree with Julie that these aren't the same thing and that they maybe shouldn't be overlapped in that way. And I mean, I guess I would be supportive of an ELL standard since that's clearly needed in Montana.
Well, they're not overlapping them right now because they're saying ESL and they're not mentioning ELL. So
Sounds like we need an ELL.
Yeah.
standard.
Okay, in addition, yeah.
Curtis has his hand, well, Curtis has his hand up, and then I think there's somebody else, but go ahead, Curtis.
I would agree. I think ELL would be another opportunity to sort of get to the understanding. I assume, or at least my experience suggests, it's mostly indigenous communities that struggle with those deficits or consideration, and there's lots of interesting research in that to help us understand a little better. I'm certainly no expert at all, but my limited knowledge, that would be helpful.
So Zach,
Okay.
maybe we need to include something then at the bottom of this, under D. Because as you start to see here, it starts to talk about ELL. And so maybe we should make some kind of note here about consideration around recommending that these be pulled out to be one in themselves from under world languages.
Mhm.
And then I see Gary also has his hand up, so I'm typing, maybe go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, thanks. I just have a procedural question, Zach. Is it my understanding that once we get through these, then we will go back and this group will vote either to approve or disapprove these recommendations? Do we not have the ability to recommend that these be further reviewed by a variety of experts?
I think you have the ability to make that recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Does that capture what you're thinking, Julie?
Yes.
Okay,
And then I'm hearing what Gary is saying as well.
okay.
So Zach, just doing a check-in on procedural, where are we at in terms of viewing all of the endorsements?
Well, we're on page 38 of 198. You know, we haven't, obviously, industrial arts, music, PE, we don't have any recommendations in those areas, but that leaves a lot of ground to be covered still.
Okay, so you have, doing a time check here, you've got 30 minutes, so, and I'm not sure how you want to get that captured. Just doing a time check.
No, I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, do you want to have a vote? on the things that we aren't contentious about.
I mean, I think what we had envisioned when I had talked with Julie procedurally was that we would first of all vote on the items where we had no recommendations and try to lump those together and see if everyone was in agreement that we would move those forward as is. We could certainly start there. But I'll kind of wait to hear what people are thinking.
I mean, while we have a forum, I think we should, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I believe we do have a quorum. Let me just double check that. Actually, hold on. Stevie has her hand up.
Stevie?
And yes, we do have a quorum at the current time.
Okay, Zach, my question is, when we vote on the areas where there's no changes listed, will you differentiate for us which ones have been reviewed and have no changes, or were not reviewed and therefore no changes reported or requested, so that we know exactly what we're voting on?
You bet. So we didn't have any reviewers for art, theater, industrial arts, health, or PE.
So Zach,
So-
could you repeat that one more time? There was nobody who reviewed again?
Art, theater, industrial arts, health, or PE.
Okay, could we maybe put that on the screen somewhere, maybe at the very bottom of this page? So
Right.
that
We can put it in the
all of
chat.
that-
Put it in the
Because-
chat.
Just scroll down to the bottom
To the bottom of the page or the bottom of the
Yeah.
document?
of the document. Okay, just add maybe so I think what Stevie is saying, right, is she wants to delineate between which of these endorsement areas were there no changes because nobody reviewed it versus which were the ones that there were no changes recommended but were reviewed. So I think it just visually it'd be important to list those out there. So you said no changes, no reviewer.
Or if I say no experts.
Okay. And then because that's probably for the task force, right? They're probably going to be thinking about what does that mean? Are they going to vote to recommend that they not no changes move forward? Are they going to recommend that those be reviewed at a later date? Like, so there's some consideration there for the task force to kind of mull over versus the other ones where there were no changes, but somebody did review them. And again, I'm not sure what the task force would like to recommend to the superintendent on that, but there's a range of potential options of what you guys could recommend to the superintendent about maybe these different buckets of endorsement areas. So which, Zach, were no changes recommended, but somebody did review?
So that would be ELA, music, and then, so again, on the principals and superintendents, we, in our earlier work, did make some recommendations. It was reviewed again. by Tina Versland, but she didn't recommend any additional changes.
Okay, so let's type out then really quick, reviewed, experts reviewed, and recommended no changes for the, and list those out if you could. And then maybe as Zach's typing that, maybe the group needs to kind of talk about, because so it sounds like maybe we need to include principals and superintendents in a different flow of saying, because that's like, do you want to recommend to the superintendent the ones you already established, or do you want to reconsider those for superintendent and principals, what I hear? So experts reviewed ELA, and what was the other one, Zach? Music?
Yes,
And no changes.
correct.
And then the third area was, this task force did recommend and reviewed and revisions for
Yep.
superintendent and principal. And another expert said to keep them the same. So that's a separate kind of probably deliberation for this group, a third deliberation for this group. So as Zach's typing that out, just because of process time and components, what's the group thinking? What do they want to recommend to the superintendent around that first bucket, if you will, where there were no experts that reviewed art, theater, health, PE, and industrial arts?
Julie, before we take even a straw poll on that, I'd like to hear from Susan whether she thinks special ed has been reviewed by the experts, or because they lack the time to do so, should special ed go in that category?
Thank you, Stevie.
You're welcome.
I think I agree. I'm glad
Okay.
you brought it up.
Yes, I'm seconding your motion, I think, because as they are all very important items, this is one I'm probably the least familiar with, and so would not be as confident if we don't have expert telling us that it passes their muster.
So Susan and Stevie, just kind of a process question there. Do you want to include that up in that list up there? Or do you want to include a separate recommendation for special ed? Or will it be the same as those other ones?
I would think it would be the same, that those are items that have not had a full review, including special ed, to go back to the experts to have some additional time to massage.
Okay, so then Zach, let's add, if I hear you guys saying that correctly, you want that added up under music, special ed.
That's my preference. Everybody else can certainly weigh in.
Okay.
And in regards to the superintendent principal piece, I'd like to just clarify a little bit about what Zach said. It is true that now with this last go around, Tina did review everything and made no more recommendations than the committee had made initially. But during our initial changes and reviews, both myself from Rocky and MSU and U of M did a thorough collaborative review of the documents that we presented to the committee initially, and that has remained the same.
Okay. The one that you originally had, Stevie.
Correct.
Okay, so that's that third bucket that Zach had down at the bottom, right?
Correct.
Okay, so let's, so then how do you guys want to proceed? Do you want to kind of take those separately, that first bucket that we just talked about, and have some consideration there of what you want to recommend to the superintendent about those areas that did not have any experts review them?
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, and we have 3 hands raised. Can we go back down to the bottom, please, where we were at with that list?
Sure.
So we can just visually, stick kind of, so yeah, go ahead. Is that McCall? I'm sorry.
It's Emily.
Oh, hi, Emily.
Hi, sorry, I messaged Zach when I got back on at 10, but I'm sorry that I was in and out of other meetings earlier. And so if you answered this earlier, forgive me. Do you anticipate that the superintendent will make other changes on the areas that experts weren't identified to review? So there are no changes because there weren't experts?
So I think, like we're going to take the recommendations from you all to share with her for her to take that into consideration. So it becomes, what do you want to recommend to her, Emily? Like, do you want to recommend as a task force to her where there were no experts that reviewed these following endorsement areas, and there were no changes recommended? Would you be recommending to her to move forward with no changes and leave it as is? Would you be recommending to her that at this point make no changes and review them again later? Would you recommend that? I mean, I think that would be the question. So the task force needs to come up with what they would like to recommend to the superintendent about these particular ones that we're talking about.
Sure. I guess maybe to clarify my question, I guess since there weren't experts to be found for the task force, I mean, it's unlikely that she'll be able to recruit experts to advise on, any recommendations to the board. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's a question, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. I'd hate to,
right.
If there are experts to be found that can participate, I would rather have them on the front end with the task force recommendation than on the back end where the task force, didn't have an opportunity to engage.
Right. I think that's a good point. So we have 4 participants with their hands raised. So I'm not sure who that is.
So I have them. I don't know who was first, but I'll go with Gary first.
Yeah, just a technicality, music is included in the no experts reviewed as well as the experts reviewed. So I
Sorry.
think it's.
Yes, it was, that music was reviewed. I'm sorry, Gary. Thank you. Okay, Allison.
Thanks. I guess I would say that health and PE, there certainly are experts. And Kari was on our task force, so I'm not sure why she didn't review those.
She had said that she would. I think she just, again, didn't. It was a tight timeline.
Okay, so some of these reasons why we don't have experts is because they may not have had enough time, or we may not have had enough time to recruit experts. So in those cases, I guess I would want to recommend that we take the time to get the experts that we have, because if we don't have experts, then why are we offering endorsements? How can we be offering endorsements in Montana and the state if we don't have an expert that can review this, who can review the standards? That doesn't make sense to me. So all of these there shouldn't be the reason that there's no experts. There are experts, they may not have had enough time yet, but they need time then to review. So I guess that would be sort of my blanket recommendation is that there's experts out there. We just haven't identified them yet or gotten them to commit to spending a little time on the standards.
Okay.
And point 2 is just a question for Stevie. So I understand that we made revisions to the principal and superintendents, and I don't know if you saw my message, but I got a message that maybe U of M is not satisfied with the changes. And I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not an expert in this, but the new NELP standards, does that mean something to you, Stevie, that you can
It
help?
does.
Okay.
It does. And we did as a group discuss that. And there's 2 broad national standards for administration, NELP and the PCELs. The PCELs are most closely reflected in what we wrote, but the NELPs are fairly redundant. That was kind of the feedback that came back when we had that discussion initially.
Okay.
We certainly could include more, but I don't think we're missing anything by moving ahead.
Okay, so that was discussed. I just want to make sure. And then for the advanced programs, MCDE recommended changes for the definition of advanced programs, and have those been included in the 604s? That was the other comment that I didn't know the answer to. So Stevie, I wasn't sure if you knew the answer to that.
And I'd have to go look at it again, Allison, but I believe we had that discussion, having just finished at MCDE and then the committee working on this. Was glad to have the definition of what is an advanced program. So I will double check and make sure that that's there with our initial notes.
Okay.
To be honest, I didn't review this as carefully after I saw Tina had seen it. I just reached out to her. And again, there wasn't 100% agreement about everything in regards to NELP or P-cells.
Okay.
But there was a majority of agreement.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, I think there was one more hand up here. Susan, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to echo what Alison said, is that of course there are experts at every college that has a program listed here. There'll be somebody with that expertise and going to, say, the Council of Deans and saying, we need content experts on these particular areas. Please nominate your faculty, would have been one way to follow up with this.
So Zach, can we go please to the, so I'm just checking, I really want to be able to give the superintendent a recommendation from this group. So I heard Allison and I hear Susan as well, trying to get around, if you will, kind of emotion there. I hear them saying something around what they would recommend to the superintendent about this. So does somebody kind of want to summarize up what your guys' thinking is? Because what I hear you saying is that your recommendation isn't to move this forward as no changes, but it's rather to do some other action, as you're mentioning, and it could be what you're saying, Susan, it could be in some other way. So I would love for somebody to kind of summarize up their thoughts on what they would recommend to our superintendent around these pieces as she deliberates what her recommendations are going to be that are going to the board in March. So if she's going to be, what do you want her to think about? What are you going to recommend to her? Because I really want that captured.
Julie, I have a question about that. Early on in this process, which started way back in the late spring, we talked about how things would move along. And I think there was quite a bit of interest in, as we make a recommendation to the superintendent, if there are substantial changes made, will there be another chance for this committee to look at and discuss those? In that we have spent so much time on it so far, we may have some background information about why we recommended what we did, and then a change is made at another level. And personally, I don't want to say that the committee has made that recommendation if it's not been reviewed by us again. So if there's a major change, do you know if the superintendent plans to circle back to the folks who did the work?
So what I would say is, Stevie, so yeah, so the process will be, right, is that the recommendations will go to the superintendent from this task force. She will then make her recommendations to the board. The board then makes a decision around kind of the process and owns it from there, whether they'll put it out for, moving into public comment. What I would say is you could certainly recommend to the superintendent something like that, Stevie, that says, we would move forward with the recommendations, give you these recommendations, but these ones here, we're going to recommend to you that they continue to be, worked on. And so not to bring forward any, at this point, not to make any changes, but to rather expand the time frame for these particular endorsements, maybe, or consider them in 2023. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but in terms of like your guys' job is to give her recommendations, and then she's going to take her recommendations to the board. That's the process. So that's kind of where we're sitting.
Okay.
And they're open for comment once you see them, what the superintendent's recommendations are.
And do you believe that the board is going to want to see them in total, or is it going to be acceptable to say, we're ready to move ahead with these and these need more work? And if so, will the Office of Public Instruction do that work, or are you asking us to seek out experts as we identified we should have on each campus?
So I guess it's kind of twofold, Stevie. I think what the Office of Public Instruction is asking you all is to say right now, knowing that she's to be bringing on the timeline, her recommendations to the board in March, what do you want her to go forward with? Because she could recommend, right, to say, we want to bring forward these pieces, but please know we want to request that we keep this arm open to bring additional pieces forward. So that's, so I don't know. I mean, you guys have to decide what you want to recommend to her. And so I guess that's what, you guys need to decide, because it is on the timeline that she's going to be presenting her recommendations to the board in March. So what do you want her to consider? She's looking to you for your thoughts.
Okay. I would be, go ahead, whoever's talking.
I was just going to say, I see Gary has his hand up and then Allison also has her hand up. So maybe Gary first.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate this discussion. I guess short of making a motion, my recommendation is just as what was stated. I think the items listed, the areas listed under no expert reviewed could move forward, but it would be our recommendation that these areas be reviewed by experts and approved by a task force of experts, and then provided to the Board of Public Ed. So I think to me, the process is, I think they should be reviewed. I think they should be reviewed by experts. I think a task force would vote on these and approve them, should be made up of experts, and then provide that to the superintendent to move on to Board of Public Ed.
Does anyone second that motion?
I would second that. That's what's going to be the same suggestion I made, was that our recommendation be, if they haven't been reviewed, that they be reviewed before they are put up before the Board of Ed.
Okay, so do we want to take a vote?
Well, just a clarification, we haven't voted on any of these. We've kind of worked through them quickly, but I don't know if we have agreement on all the revisions that are made. So we need to do that somehow.
Yes,
No,
Stevie,
I-
I don't think that's what the motion is on the floor. The motion on the floor right now is to make a recommendation to the superintendent for these ones where there's been no experts reviewed, to have experts review them.
Okay, I'm great with that.
That's the motion. So we're not talking about all the other stuff. So I guess that's the question. And then there was a second motion. So I think we should take a vote on, is that what we're recommending to the superintendent? Emily?
Can I make a request that the task force as it stands right now are alerted when the groups are meeting, and what the recommendations are before or as they're being made, because I'd like to be able to see those before the superintendent provides her recommendation to the board.
So Emily, are you recommending a sort of an amendment to the existing motion?
I don't necessarily know if it needs to be in a vote, but I would like to ensure that everyone in this task force gets a copy of the experts' recommended changes before the superintendent makes her changes.
Okay.
I don't think we need to vote on that. I'm not, I think we're already past that.
Right.
But I would like to be sure that we see the changes, each, like version 1, version 2, version 3, just as you would see, multiple amended bill drafts.
Okay, so let's go then back to duly noted, Emily, let's go back to then the motion that's on the floor. So can we rephrase the motion, please, that Gary brought forward so that we can phrase that, and Allison seconded so we can take that vote. Gary, one more time, can you say what your motion was?
I move that the areas of that had no expert review, including art, theater, health, PE, industrial arts, and special education, be reviewed by experts of each area and given to a task force that includes experts for final approval to be submitted to the superintendent.
Okay, so Tristan, can you call the vote, please?
I just want to make a quick note. I believe if we have members of the public who want to comment, we need to make sure we allow that.
We do have some attendees here. Do either of you want to make a comment? You can raise your hand if you'd like to. All right, no public comment. I will start at the top of my list. First on my screen is Gary.
Yes.
Stevie.
Yes.
Allison.
Yes.
Let's see. Gail.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
McCall.
Yes.
Okay,
And
move into
some-
that.
I'm sorry, Curtis.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Who else did I miss? Anyone?
This is Susan,
Oh,
yes.
Susan, thank you. Sorry about that, Susan.
That's all right.
All right, vote passes.
Okay, thank you, Tristan. Okay, let's go to the second one. Anything you want to recommend, you guys, are to the superintendent around, if you will, ELA and music. Experts reviewed and recommended no changes in the following areas. Any recommendations for the superintendent for those two?
I move that those two areas can be passed on to the superintendent, having been reviewed by experts in their field.
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote. Tristan, can we please say what we're voting on, please?
We are voting that the areas of ELA with that had been reviewed and no changes were recommended be moved on to the superintendent. Do we need to include principals and superintendents under this
That's a
list?
separate, I think that's a separate
It's
recommendation.
separate. Okay, so it's just on ELA currently
And music.
and music.
Yeah, it should be missing.
Okay. All right, ELA and music. I will go in the same order again.
Do we
starting-
have any public
Oh.
comment?
Public comment, yes. If either of our attendees would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none. We'll start with Gary.
Yes.
Stevie,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Mary, Mary,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
McCall,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
and Susan.
Yes.
The vote passes.
Okay, going down to that next part. So Stevie, this was a piece you were talking about. What is your guys' recommendations on the principal and superintendent endorsements that the task force has already considered?
Well, did you add the ELL? The ELL, you wanted separate or something?
We haven't talked about that yet, Mary.
Okay.
I'm just focusing in on this bulleted here point on the principal and superintendent endorsements. Any recommendation from the task force to the superintendent on this?
I think we've reviewed this. It's been reviewed by experts. So I feel like we are ready to vote on these standards and recommend the changes that we've come up with to the superintendent.
I'll second that.
Emily, did you have a comment around this?
Yeah, is this referring to the 705 and 706?
Yes.
Correct.
So have we
697.
So if we can, for I know that I saw Christie's chat.
Yeah, so Emily, the task force had come up with recommendations for the endorsements for principals and superintendents, as we were talking about under the PSL standards and the piece around this is some expert also reviewed it, another person, and then said, I recommend no changes. So the conversation is saying, rather than saying no changes, the task force, the conversation was from Stevie, was to say, let's keep them what we originally said, rather than no changes.
Okay, so not what the Google Doc is actually saying right now.
Right, correct. To go back to what the task force originally had put forward for the
I'm
principal.
comfortable with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe I could clarify, I think Tina was saying no additional changes.
Oh.
I wasn't saying don't do our changes that we spent all that time on. She was,
Yeah.
because she was part of making those changes, that individual.
Yeah, I'm sure that is because she was one of the ones that after we had a draft, we reached out to, and she did, as everyone did, massage it a little bit at that time, but that's what you see in front of you.
So she was basically affirming the changes you all said.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so do you guys want to take a motion there and a vote?
Does that need to be changed then on an expert review the expert made no recommendations, but we did. Is that right?
So it needs to be changed to an expert reviewed the endorsement.
Already
agreed.
Okay.
Agreed to the changes of the task force. It needs to be said. Or made no changes to the task force recommendations.
So Julie, do you want me to change this language somehow? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it says that an expert did review the endorsements and made no recommendations to the task force changes. Okay, I think we had a motion and we had it second.
Yes, Allison moved, and please correct me if it sounds wrong in any way. Moves that the areas an expert reviewed the endorsement of principals and superintendents and made no additional recommendations beyond those already recommended by the task force. And then Stevie seconded. Is that correct, Allison?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, we'll start with Gary.
Do we want to make sure did we open it for public comment just in case?
No, you're right. I'm sorry. I keep skipping that. If either of our attendees have a comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none. Emily, did you have another comment?
Nope, just forgot to put my hand down.
No problem. I just want to check. All right, Gary.
Yes.
Stevie.
Hallelujah, yes, we're done with this one.
Allison.
Yes.
Gail.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Emily.
Yes.
Call.
Yes.
Curtis.
Yes.
And Susan.
Yes.
Vote passes.
Okay, so I'm just doing a time check here. Do we want to have a consideration for the ESL? Do you have any recommendations to the superintendent, maybe similar to what you've already said above around, do you?
Not ESL, ELL.
Yes, sorry. For ELL, do we want to make a recommendation maybe to the superintendent to kind of do similar to the top part there, which we did with music and special ed? What are your guys' recommendations to her on the ELL?
I would say, yes, we want to have additional expert opinion about standards regarding ELL.
Second.
Okay,
Allison, can you repeat that for me?
Zach, can you type that on the screen, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We would like to recommend additional expert review on standards regarding ELL.
And who seconded?
I did, Stevie.
Thank you, Stevie. All right, we'll give time for public comment.
Oh, and then there's also ASL, right?
We already have a broad recommendation
Oh,
on
okay.
that one, Mary.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no public comment, I will start again with Gary,
Yes.
Stevie.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I lost my place. Allison,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
McCall,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Susan.
Yes.
Thank you. Vote passes.
okay, then the last piece is, what do you want to do on the endorsement areas where there were experts that did review it and make recommendations? What's your recommendations to the superintendent on those?
And what are those? Are those listed?
Hey, Zach, can you write that up of what was where there were expert opinion?
Yeah, let me, I'm trying to think the easiest way to do that. Because they're all, hold on one second. I have a way to do this. Tristan, can you do me a favor and just make a note of these, and then I can, maybe you can just help me. I can
Yes.
put them in the document.
Type it in the chat. Okay, go ahead. What are they, Zach?
Okay, so they would be agriculture education, business education, world languages, family and consumer science, journalism, library media K-12, mathematics, reading specialist K-12, science, social studies, communications, traffic education, computer science, early childhood education, elementary education, and school psychologists.
what would you guys like to recommend to the superintendent on those endorsement areas? What are your thoughts?
I would recommend that we support the changes that experts recommended to the superintendent on these that were reviewed by experts.
I'd second that.
I'd just add, if there was makerspace on libraries, I don't know if there is, I didn't check it. And then the last part of the early childhood, we were gonna look at that and try to put it into special education, but that's a special education thing, so the early childhood should be okay.
Yeah, it sounds like given the recommendations that you've made as a task force.
On the
there.
early childhood, well, they did put environment. They didn't say environment, but they did mention different environments, so.
Okay. All right. Okay, so expert review and recommendations occurred in the following areas. Okay, so do we have, Allison had a motion. Allison, do you want to say it one more time?
That we support the recommendations made by experts on the areas that were reviewed.
Do we have any second on that?
I second it, Stevie.
Oh, thanks, Stevie.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
On the industrial arts, we might, which, doesn't have an expert, we might ask about the makerspace. But, okay. That's the only comment I have.
Sure. Thank you, Mary. Seeing no public comment, I will begin with Gary,
Yes.
Stevie,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Emily,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
and Susan.
Yes.
Vote passes.
Okay, so it sounds like you guys, just to kind of summarize up and next steps is, oh, yay, thank you. I do think that's going to be important, Christy. I know there was definitely feedback on the feedback group on Monday of saying that they know people that could definitely get involved in that too. So awesome. Okay, so in terms of then you guys, next steps, just so you know, these recommendations that you've just made will be added to your previous recommendations for the initial standards of the 300s and the 600s and 700s that you've already moved forward. She has those already. So she's working on her recommendations. We're going to take these ones and add that and pass these along to the superintendent. So next steps is the superintendent will take all of this into deliberation from the recommendations from this task force, and she'll be putting together her recommendations to go to the Board of Public Ed to be shared at the March meeting on the 10th and the 11th. So I think what we can do, because Emily had asked a question about that, is be sure that this task force gets a copy of, if you will, what the superintendent's recommendations are as well, so that they can see what those are. McCall, did you want to add anything about that as we talk about the process of moving those recommendations to you all?
I don't think so. I think you hit it. We're working on the agenda right now. There'll be kind of two items on that. The first will be a presentation to the board on their initial review of these recommendations. And then the second piece of that is for the board to adopt the notice of public hearing, which basically just begins the MAPA process, in which we have 6 months and there's public hearings and all sorts of other things. And but that is all I would add. Thanks, Julie.
Okay, Gary, you had a question?
Me?
Gary.
Gary.
Yeah, I just have a comment as I went through all these. I read the entire document, and there are some words in there that I just want to express my concern, I guess, based on the many board meetings I've been in, that these are hot topic words, and I'm talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and others. And my personal recommendation is that those words do not be removed from any of these documents. And I have no idea what the superintendent intends to do, but I just wanted to express my view on that those words need to remain in these documents. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary, and that is noted.
And then I mentioned critical thinking. I'm not sure if they did say it in science. I didn't see it, but I didn't review it. And then also makerspace and industrial arts and libraries. But if you could just make a comment about that.
Okay, there were two hands raised. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Gary.
I think one of them was Gary, but I think
Okay.
Stevie was the other.
Okay, Stevie.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Gary has said. It's so important that we include that language, which we have come to embrace through CAPE and other accreditation bodies, that those words stay and that they stay uppermost in our mind as we serve the kids of the state. And it would be a real disservice if we took them out.
Okay. All righty. Thank you, Stevie.
Welcome.
All right, so you can anticipate, you guys, then an email from Zach and Tristan, probably, sometime next week, early that first week in March, but sometime prior to the Board of Public Ed, so that you also have a copy of what the superintendent's recommendations are to the board. And then as McCall has mentioned, they'll be posting their agenda and those documents on their website before the board meeting on March 10th and 11th. So just from the Office of Public Instruction and from the superintendent, we just want to thank you for all your time and effort and consideration and thought that you've put forward in this group. And I'm so excited that you're enlisting in for more. Sounds like so to be continued, it sounds like potentially. So we will share that with her. But I just want to extend her gratitude to each of you, knowing that your heart is with our students and all of our pre-service teachers of all the things that we do to prepare them for this great state and all of the kids. So thank you guys. Cheryl, did you want to add anything before we close out from the office?
Yeah, I just have one thing to share and add with all of you. And what was very positive experience was absolutely the clash of viewpoints that were expressed and the key needs. And so I'm a firm believer of that we never get to actual truth and foundational work if we're not willing to engage in those clashes. So I commend each and every one of you for that willingness to share those viewpoints as we move forward. And keeping in mind that the absolute requirement of our education is to develop those education systems that develop the full education potential of each person and ensure the equality in the state of Montana. So that is our state constitution, that we're coming up on our 50th year anniversary with that constitution. And so I would remind all of us that the North Star that we all are looking at is the Montana State Constitution and Article 10. So thank you.
I think Gary had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to thank Zach and Julie and Tristan for doing a great job facilitating these meetings and sending out the information. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Gary, and thanks. I'll just echo what's already been said to all of you. And I'm just really glad that you guys want to see more of me. So
Thank you, Gary, for that recognition to Zach and to Tristan. He certainly has gone above and beyond representing your guys' voice here as a task force. So I just personally want to recognize these two individuals and the efforts that they've provided. So thank you for that. I'm just so lucky I just get to consider them a part of my team. So they're great team members. So, and thank you to Ed Northwest as well, Eric.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Mary. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks for all your work. Bye.